Today I want to quickly talk with you about the most common nursing errors during labor and delivery that we see. And this is going to be in the context of a baby suffering a traumatic brain injury at birth. That traumatic brain injury is HIE, or Hypoxic-Ischemic Encephalopathy. Quick definition for HIE that we're going to be working with today is a cutoff or reduction of oxygenated blood, which can lead a baby to suffer a traumatic brain injury. I am a birth injury lawyer, and I talk with families all the time about these types of issues. I review thousands and thousands of pages of medical records, and in this process, I've been able to see some patterns emerge when I'm giving families answers as to why their baby has suffered this type of injury, whether it's genetics or developmental, or whether it's medical malpractice. And when it's medical malpractice, remember, we're not talking about an intentional act. We're talking about essentially negligence that occurs. And that, drilling down to that, is where we get to these type of errors that are being made. And one of the most common ones that we see by nurses in this HIE context is a failure to respond adequately to a baby that is in distress. A failure by the nurses to respond adequately to a baby that is in distress. Now, when I'm talking about a baby that's in distress, we're going to be working with today a abnormal heart rate. That's what we're going to be talking about, on problems on the electronic fetal heart monitor, which are suggesting that there are oxygen issues for the baby. I'm not going to get too deep in today's video about the electronic fetal heart monitor. Just the short of it is that, because I've got other videos in which you can watch on our page talking about the electronic fetal heart monitor, but the short of it is that this is a device that is used in many hospitals. Almost all hospitals in the United States today are using the electronic fetal heart monitor. It's helping doctors and nurses understand in real time certain things that's going on with your baby during labor and delivery. And not only your baby, mom, but you also. It's looking at your contractions. It's looking at the strength of your contractions, your contraction patterns. It's looking at your baby's heart rate. Is your baby's heart rate too high? Is your baby's heart rate too low? It's looking at things like variability for your baby. Is there good or moderate variability? Is there absent variability? Is there minimal variability? It's looking at the patterns, certain types of patterns on the monitor, whether there are accelerations that are there, whether there are decelerations that are there. The electronic fetal heart monitor is important, and nurses are trained to understand how to read the readings on this monitor and what to do when certain types of readings show up. And again, the most common issue that we see is that failure to respond adequately to what is going on this monitor. Now, I want to break down that failure to respond adequately to your baby that's in distress. There are 4 big areas that we see this when we drill down a little bit further. And I kind of hinted at the first one when what I just said, and that is the failure to monitor your baby's heart rate. That is something that is critical. And when there are errors that show up with this failure to respond, a lot of times it's the nurses. They failed to monitor that heart rate. You can't have your baby's heart rate, I'm not going to get too technical into it, but you can't have your baby's heart rate too high for a considerable amount of time, especially when there are other things that may be going on. Say there's minimal variability that's going on, or you have late decelerations or prolonged deceleration with the baby's heart rate too high for a long time. You can't have that. That's going to increase the chance of your baby suffering a brain injury. Just like with your baby's heart rate too high, the same thing when your baby's heart rate is too low and you've got other things that are going on. Late decelerations, maybe there's absent variability, all of these types of things, or maybe mom's having too many contractions, maybe there's too much Pitocin that's being used. All of these types of things can lead your baby in some instances to suffer a traumatic brain injury. And that is why it is critical for nurses to monitor your baby's heart rate. So that first, key area when we drill down is for the nurses, the failure to monitor the heart rate. The second one is going to be a delayed response to that abnormal heart rate. So maybe eventually the nurses, they pick it up and they say, okay, we've got some problems here. This baby, we've had bradycardia that's been going on for a considerable amount of time. Something's got to be done. But if there is a delay in responding, if there's a delay in communicating to the doctor as to what is happening to mom and baby, then again, these are things that can increase your baby's chances of suffering this type of traumatic brain injury, especially when when a emergency C-section may be needed or warranted, but there's been a delay in responding to the doctors, about this C-section. The third one can be Poor communication. This is poor communication with the entire medical team. I want a quick example of a case that we had, a previous case of ours in which there was a senior midwife, nurse midwife, and then there was a L&D nurse that was also there. Both of them were taking care of mom and baby, but the L&D nurse was not as experienced as the senior nurse midwife. And so the nurse midwife was going through with everything. There were issues that were going on the electronic fetal heart monitor that clearly showed that this baby was having some problems and some challenges. But the communication was poor between the senior nurse midwife, the L&D nurse, and to the doctor. So there was information that the nurses were not forwarding or getting to the doctor in a timely manner, so certain actions could take place. And this baby went on and suffered a traumatic brain injury. So that third one is going to be poor communication with the nurses and the medical team. You can't have that. That increases the chances of a baby suffering a traumatic brain injury. And the fourth thing is going to be inadequate documentation in the medical record. You can have nurses that after the fact are saying certain things, but none of this is in the medical records. This can be an inadequate documentation of things like vitals. This could be inadequate documentations of discussions that were taking place supposedly between the nurses and mom in regards to certain things, not in the record. So inadequate documentation, again, this can be problematic because if the record is not documented the right way and certain information is not down, then that can be critical for treatment. So if this information is missing, then this can impact what types of treatments might be available and in a timely manner for mom and baby. So I know I talked about a lot here today, but again, the most common error that we see during labor and delivery and when these babies have suffered a traumatic brain injury is usually a failure to respond to a baby that is in distress, a baby that's not really tolerating that vaginal delivery well, and things are showing up. And there has been just a failure on that part. Now, in some instances, babies will suffer these types of injuries, these HIE injuries. It will not be medical malpractice. Sometimes it's genetics. Sometimes it's developmental things. But for a lot of families, when they have questions about this is where they're going because they don't understand a lot of these things. That's why they reach out to someone like myself, a birth injury lawyer, to at least be able to get some help to understand what may have happened with their baby during labor and delivery. All right, that's going to be it for today's quick video. Again, I'm Marcus Boston, and I'm one of the childbirth injury lawyers here at Boston Law Group, LLC. We'll talk with you next time. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.